So starting with page 205 in part 3 of Listen Humanity, the overall section is titled Avatarhood, and this chapter 1 is Personal Relationship. And we're about in the middle of it. One of the, let's segue with the last few paragraphs from last week too. One of the greatest gifts received from Baba is the renewal of spontaneity. For as he sets one's nature incomprehensibly back into motion, life again becomes an adventure. There is newness, unpredictability, hope, sustainment around each corner in time. The soul becomes once more like a child, and one is struck by the lightness of one's heart. Life is no less complex. There are no fewer problems to be solved. One's consciousness of the tragedies of life has not been dulled. But the greatest tragedy of all, the loss of hope, has been wiped out. No wonder there is room for happiness. The deep loyalty, devotion, and trust which Meher Baba's adherents give to him is based in part on this relief from stagnation which he provides. It is also based on another factor, a certainty of support in crisis. Of all the intangibles in which Meher Baba deals, this is perhaps the most difficult to fathom. One day there is not the courage to face certain things in self and in the world. The next day, the courage is there. Meher Baba has come into one's life in the interim. This is not a solitary observation based on one person's experience. It would be remarkable, even if that were the case. It is the experience of thousands and thousands who have had personal contact with the silent man. It is possible to speculate indefinitely on how the transformation is accomplished. One cannot help but think of the tales of the Christians who faced the lions in the Roman arena with smiles on their faces. There apparently is such a thing as supreme courage, and it is apparently based on supreme certainty. But how is supreme certainty suddenly achieved? I have no way of knowing, but I do know that I can now face things in my life which would have sent me hiding behind a wall of frustration a few years ago. It may be in the long run that it is this complete acceptance of oneself by Baba which does it. Ordinarily, the human being never seems free of some sense of insecurity in his human relations. People have an awkward way of suddenly becoming very much apart. Sometimes they do it out of simple selfishness, sometimes in carelessness, often in the name of righteousness. The net effect is that one is alone. No one is able to feel alone and at the same time full of the warmth and satisfaction of life. Much of oldness also comes from having tried again and again to spin a bridge of trust and affection across to another human being and having seen it smashed each time. Finally, one begins to feel that perhaps there is no such thing as being truly united with another being, that at best it is an unpredictable, groping game of great aloneness. I have seen many, many grown men and women burst suddenly into tears because of some unexpected gesture of utmost thoughtfulness shown by Meher Baba. I have seen many others burst into tears without that action, but rather because Baba had uncannily filled up a void in their hearts, as if through the unexpected finding of a mother or father long thought gone. To feel complete acceptance by another being is a wonderful thing. To find that someone has absolutely no negative reaction to the wrongness or ununderstandability in one's life is worth more than all the gold in the world. It gives one courage to be one's real self and to risk whatever might come. The matter goes still further. It is not just acceptance by another person which does the trick. It is being connected with other resources as well. The two things go closely. The two things go closely hand in hand. The individual is almost two persons, the outer self and the inner self. And very often, they do not know how to be friendly with one another. Once another person is found who can accept one without a qualm, it is infinitely easier to accept oneself. The sting of sin and wrongdoing are removed. The black curtain is drawn aside and one may walk out as one's own friend. Only then does it become clear how badly one had been crippled by inner doubt and indecision. From there, it is not as great a step as it might seem to be able to regard the oncoming lion with a smile. On a percentage basis, there is not a large proportion of people in the world who have any degree of this healing faculty of accepting the bad as well as the good in another person. Most people at best wished to do good and remedy the bad. So the individual who can accept is rare, and he who can accept all is truly the treasure of inestimable value. It would be rash to give the impression that Mir Baba cannot be angered or that he cannot send someone packing who has been told to do one thing but has done something else. These situations do occur and they can be very painful. Nevertheless, while Mir Baba's left hand may be chastising severely, his right hand is holding up one's heart so that it can endure. Then, if one still cannot endure, it is not because the warm support is not there, but because humiliation has become the matter of greatest importance. To witness Meher Baba handling the mechanics of human emotion is an awesome sight, provided one is not involved. To be embroiled in a complex emotional situation with Meher Baba at the controls is like going through a kaleidoscopic crazy house with hands darting from walls and steam jets shooting up underfoot and great magnets drawing at every bit of iron, all set loose in rapid succession. On emerging, there is no doubt that one has really had the works, but one is sustained through it all. Even as the tremolo crescendo is at its height, there is sustainment to an exactly equivalent degree. The only things which get rattled are the loose screws which need to be rattled. They are located quite quickly. Sustainment, then, is the second principle which draws unplumbed allegiance allegiance to Baba from his adherents. The third is undoubtedly the most important: love, warmth, tenderness. First, it comes from Meher Baba, and one is momentarily caught unawares, perhaps even embarrassed by it. Then it comes from oneself. And again, there is no anticipation of the action. It springs out suddenly when least expected, and one can feel something like a sheepish puppy, which has just unexpectedly wet in the middle of the living room rug, and now wonders whether it may have done the wrong thing. It is an odd fact of our civilization that people hunger for a lifetime for simple human warmth, and yet are afraid to show it and suspicious when it is offered. Probably it is because there is so little of the honest variety available. It is a rare person who blossoms in a natural plenty of warmth and affection. Most people want it. Most people look for it. Most people are deeply touched when they find an honest trace of it. And yet few people are capable of giving it. The problem is confused because the physical part of love is inextricably entangled with the purely feeling element. Many people want love, but instinctively shy away from the complex entanglements usually involved. Other people adopt the reverse principle of rebellion against inhibitions and plunge into the most compromising involvements. Love is a very warm matter that demands some concrete means of expression. The great problem is to know where feeling and expression begin and leave off. Because people feel an inherent reaction against promiscuity, and because they sometimes cannot differentiate between warmth of feeling and intense physical involvement, they often deny the one in order to avoid the other. This is not to be wondered at. The subject is charged with the least understood and least controllable factors in human nature. In addition to this, it is beset by the greatest set of taboos in civilized existence. Meher Baba slices perpendicularly through the tangled mass and shows a wealth of warm love expressed in simple physical actions that melt the ice of human inhibition like a blowtorch. One's first reaction is often embarrassment or awkwardness at such a simple show of human affection. And one looks instinctively for the hidden booby trap. Certainly there must be something back of all this. Or perhaps the slap in the face will come in the next moment. Love is instinctively discounted after a few unhappy experiences. It is difficult to believe that it is true even when one experiences the real thing. After a few minutes or hours or days with Meher Baba, however, one's honest self catches on to the fact that here, for the first time, is spontaneous, outgoing love, which demands absolutely nothing in return. It is a sheer gift of warmth, and through it, one wishes in some way to be worthy of it. How does Meher Baba express his affection for people? The first meeting may be a handshake or a light caress of the cheek or a warm, understanding glance. Sometimes it may be a brief embrace. However, when it has become the third or the fifth or the 10th meeting, it almost inevitably becomes a seconds long gentle embrace with cheek placed carefully to cheek, and then a slight push to indicate that the greeting is at an end. Baba rarely prolongs the physical side of salutation, but he gives it its due, and he gives it great meaning. These are the broad bases of the attraction which Meher Baba has for people. These are the unarguing facts of the emotional needs and response of people. The individual finds an emotional satisfaction from Meher Baba which has never been matched anywhere in his previous life. It is no wonder then that this response becomes the all important fact for him, and that usual ties begin to dim and fall by the wayside. Much of one's involvement in business, society, and even family is the result of unconscious sublimation of direct emotional needs. When someone such as Meher Baba appears, who not only responds to one's deepest emotional needs, but even challenges them to deeper levels than had existed before, then there is bound to be a readjustment of the intensity of previous emotional commitments. This can be painful to other persons who have not developed a similar emotional outlet. Husbands or wives are often alarmed at the redirection of emotional drive, and, and bosses wonder whether their old workhorses will continue to drag the load uncomplainingly. Probably, if God Himself should suddenly say, in quite unmistakable tones, so that the whole world could hear and know Him, quote, "Folks, I've decided creation has fulfilled its purpose, so I'm going to abandon the project now and take you all back to me," end quote. There would be a great shout from the souls of some billions of persons who would feel that he had made the wrong move. Chapter 2, General Atmospheres is the title. What about Meher Baba's claim to be the avatar? Although it may be difficult for one who has never met Baba to imagine his having a great attraction for oneself, still it may be possible from the preceding to understand the loyalty and devotion he draws. Undoubtedly, these are signs of great public genius, but other persons also attract people strongly and yet lay no claim to universal spiritual importance. What source can be tapped then to judge Meher Baba's unique function? The subjective self is peculiarly blind to comparisons. All the individual knows is that he is deeply attached or repelled in many situations in life. And by that very reaction, his ability to be objective is destroyed or at least impaired. Therefore, sources of information beyond the area of impact of Meher Baba must be available to judge the probabilities of Meher Baba being the savior of our age. Unfortunately, for such an analysis, Meher Baba's immediate followers are the least fertile source of information because of the importance of the subjective element in their own relationship. The writer is not a good source either. but perhaps he represents an acceptable overall compromise. He is familiar with Baba and his background, and still partially able to recognize that there are definite Western criteria which apply to and must be met by great spiritual genius. However, he must hasten with his writing, for the temptation is almost overpowering to scrap the whole thing and plunge into the fullest uncritical enjoyment of the rich relationship which is offered. The first important atmosphere which derives from Baba is that of the miraculous. It exists, and no doubt of it. All of life around him becomes a miracle, composed of the most unbelievable coincidences, astounding good fortune, and split-second precipitation into acute crises. The coincidence factor, which is something like a batting average, but is inverse to pure chance, leaps to a remarkable figure. This atmosphere of the miraculous about Baba seems to sweep everyone into its maw, whether a close associate or a casual passerby. Often one holds one's breath in anticipation of what may happen to some complete stranger who happens to wander into Baba's neighborhood. To people who are linked to Baba, the unexpected happens with great regularity. One is acutely aware of this extraordinary speeding up and meshing of events in life. In previous years, I have occasionally seen such an atmosphere develop to some degree around a few very remarkable people, or in certain deeply rooted religious or mystic groups. The speed, intensity, and magnitude, though, were totally different from that generated by Mir Baba. This is the first important difference. The second difference is that an increased coincidence factor is almost always an outgrowth of deliberate application of psychic principles. This again is not the case with Meher Baba. One cannot avoid the conclusion that these things, amazing and forceful as they are nevertheless byproducts. They happen as they do because they must, in order to fit in with something basic which Baba is accomplishing in the individual. In the story of Nosher that Baba tells in part 1 of this volume, he points out that he does not consciously work miracles. And that's starred. Let's go down and see what the star says. On the other hand, Baba states in his Beams, that's the book Beams, published by Peter Popper, 1955, page 39, quote, God does not bother about performing further minor miracles within this universe, but leaves it to the reign of laws. However, this does not apply to the God-man, who may, if he deems it to be fit and necessary, perform numberless miracles in supervention of the normal routine working of the universe, without attaching any special importance to them, without attaching any special importance to them. This, to me, is the most important point of all. Instinctively, I know inside myself that making miracles would do exactly what Baba says, obscure the true relation of the individual to Baba. Instinctively, I know also that it would take a being of matchless quality to have such great power in his hands that miracles occurred again and again in his shadow, and yet not use that power consciously for anything except the greatest miracle of all, the freeing of the human soul. It does no good to document this portion of the story with incident after incident of a miraculous nature, which has occurred near Baba. I would cite my own persistent sinus condition, which has led up twice, which has led up only twice in 18 months. Once while I was with Mayor Baba in India, once while I was traveling with him in the United States. Or I could tell about the doctor from New York who has had a constant skin affliction on his hands for years. And after being with Baba for a week, noted to his astonishment that the condition had improved markedly. Baba is like an intense, radiating source of sanity and health. But his greatest impact is concentrated in the ultimate, man's relation to his inner self. If he or any other great teacher once broke that cardinal principle, he would undoubtedly sacrifice, partly or wholly, the ultimate for the present. I believe with all my heart that Baba is telling the literal truth when he says that he has never had anything consciously to do with wonder working miracles. But I also have no doubt whatsoever that many of the miracles attributed to Baba are actually due to his general influence. The world stands on its head all around him, and it would not surprise me the least bit if an entire cemetery lifted up its gravestones and walked out of sheer interest in the man. Whereas the sadhu or saint appears to produce extraordinary results through his deft ability to handle forces within the operation of universal law, Baba seems rather to sit outside the entire tangled maze and to handle the law itself. If a miracle results, it does not seem that Baba has decreed that the lame shall get up and walk, but rather that a man shall fulfill a certain life function. And if an unsound limb is healed in the process, that fact is purely coincidental. The second general atmosphere which permeates from Mayor Baba is one of quiet omniscience. I have seen him make decisions on several occasions which I felt were absolutely wrong. But after time and tide had their say, I was forced to divide these situations into two categories. First, there were those in which clearly Baba had been actually correct and I had been wrong. In the second category, a very strange thing occurs. On the surface, things seem to work out wrong, and one often has a wish that they had worked out better. Then there develops a nagging suspicion that what meets the eye is not the entire story. One is forced to stretch to a new and bigger standard. And then, all at once, it becomes apparent that Baba's decision was aimed at fishing for much bigger fish, the salvation of someone's soul, and the apparent values of the world could go down if he made a dent in the real problem. I've seen him stand up simply and unequivocally for the lowest underdog. I've seen him stand up simply and unequivocally for the lowest underdog, the person everyone was running down with the most righteous indignation. I've seen him give food and diamonds and love to that person when most of those close to Baba felt that the man had lied and cheated and already run off with 1,000 times his share. Jay, could you unmute and continue, please?
Yes, I'll try. What was the answer? Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly, loud and clear.
Okay, what was the answer? The man really loved Baba and Baba knew it and stood up for him because the man needed support. And the people who were running him down needed a real crisis and they got it. This is an example of what goes on about Baba minute by hour by day. It takes only a few instances in which one prejudges Baba's actions to teach one to await the outcome in neutrality in the future. In doctoring the real needs of human souls, he probes quickly to the heart of the matter and decides. And I've never been able to judge him wrong. All I've been able to do is try to recognize higher and higher standards of human insight and compassion by watching the true surgeon at work. I have even had to entertain very seriously the idea that perhaps Meher Baba gave me the responsibility of describing these Sahavas programs primarily to keep me concentrating on him and his attributes at the risk of having a book turned out all wrong. I know he would go to even this extremity if he felt it would help my development. There's one additional point regarding Baba's apparent omniscience which needs examination. It can be described as Baba's knowing and not knowing, all at the same time, just as a diffuse air of the miraculous surrounds him without his clear and direct involvement in miracles, so he often seems aware of all general happenings without necessarily knowing their specific details. For instance, he will ask direct questions concerning one's actions and plans, or he will ask what the newspaper has said about the Thailand-Red China border situation, or the nature of a train disaster in India. The immediate question is, how can Baba be the highest of the high if he doesn't know these things already? And if he does know them already, why does he take up time asking about them? This is typical of the questions one constantly asks when one is near Baba. He rarely explains the conflicting facts, and one is left to try to puzzle out an answer. In this instance, I have had first to reject an erroneous, the possibilities that Meher Baba does not know, or that he is engaged in some complex faking. The day-to-day facts do not support either hypothesis. Next, it is undoubtedly true that Baba, like any astute physician of human problems, often asks a pointed question purely to crystallize the issue in the mind of the individual being queried. The question in such case is a rhetorical vehicle for the precipitation of issues rather than for the gaining of information. However, When such questions are subtracted from the total Baba asks, there remains an unexplained residue. The best explanation for these seems to occur when one takes quite literally Baba's statement that from time to time, God limits himself in the form of a man and comes as a Christ to do a great work within the limiting conditions of the earth. If this is true, and there is certainly historical precedent for it, and if Meher Baba is that manifestation of God in limited form, then it follows at once that within him must lie all the unlimited qualities we associate with God. And yet, to do the job within the limitations of form and matter, those limitations must be literally respected. This does not mean that the man himself is limited within himself, but that he has willingly accepted certain restrictions inherent in accomplishing the job. In brief, I believe wholeheartedly that Meher Baba is playing the game strictly according to the rules. Within himself, he knows, but within that function which lives in and deals with the material world, he does not know, and so he often asks questions. The net result, played fairly, should appear much like a highly intuitive man who lives close to the vast resources of his subconscious. There's always uncanny knowledge, but it is generally not directly available in the case of the intuitive individual or made use of in the case of Baba. These conclusions fit the case of Meher Baba closely. For me, it has been one of a number of factors which have caused my own reasoning to reinforce the triangulations of my heart that there is not only a possibility but a major probability that Meher Baba is truly what he says he is, the avatar of the age. A third general atmosphere which surrounds Meher Baba is that of the greatest personal power. He gives the impression of a giant electric generator, humming quietly, with its energy directed along cables which disappear through the walls of environment and out into the imponderables of creation. Occasionally, there is an opportunity to judge something of the total current that flows through the system by being linked for a few moments to one of the leads. Whether one is alone with Baba at such a time or involved in some group project, the result is startling. Things happen with a speed and intensity nowhere matched in the environment. If it be personal matters, they usually precipitate in brief moments. If they are group undertakings, they usually are brought to a head as fast as hands, feet, and gelling human emotions can carry them out. I introduced the term gelling human emotions deliberately. There is almost never a group project carried out for Baba which does not include this element. Human emotion is almost inevitably entangled in the matter, or else Baba deliberately prods it into entanglement. In the rapid sweep of events, group emotion is first snared and tangled in a jumble and then unexpectedly extricated. Baba rarely allows a project with its attendant emotional schooling to go on for long. The movement is rapid and the lesson profound, and then it is all abruptly ended. Someone may object that it would take a hard-hearted man deliberately to snarl human emotions in the physical problems of life. After all, life is difficult enough as it is, and what the individual needs is peace. It is true that most people are emotionally exhausted by the complex entanglements of daily living and by failure to receive compensating emotional gratification. Probably for this reason, much of Baba's early contact with the individual consists in building a bridge of warmth and understanding. Over a period of time, in this benevolent sunshine of sustaining feeling, the raw sensitivities begin to heal and the person begins to build a plus balance of emotional energy. Then Baba seems to start the the true rebuilding job. This consists in helping the individual meet living situations. Oh, sorry. Living situations that demand thought, care, and energy. They occur rapidly after one has met Baba. They occur even more rapidly and more explosively in Baba's immediate presence. The astounding thing is that the tensions are no longer winding up tighter and tighter, but rather are unwinding. With one hand, Baba precipitates, with the other, he sustains. Out of it, the human being emerges with gained insight and emotional stamina. How could one possibly wish for more? The only other hope might be that one should learn in a rosy dream of sweet bliss. Nature, though, never produces something for nothing. The best that can be hoped for is to have the strength to meet the challenges of life as they are presented, and Baba does give that sustainment from which one's own natural resources flow readily forth. It must seem tiresome to a reader to read constantly in terms of superlatives. Isn't there something about Baba which is imperfect, negative, downright revolting? I have thought of this problem a good many times, for I know that I would become incredulous if someone were to describe such a paragon to me. I have even thought of deliberately playing down certain of the values one receives from Baba for the sake of their more credible consumption. However, I know as soon as I think of such a thing that if I cannot write honestly, there's no use in writing. So I will continue to write exactly as I have experienced the thing. The people who have been near Baba for months and years and perhaps not yet perfect. I do know though that these people have a calm and a strength of character which lifts them at the least into the rank of outstanding persons. Baba's own physical energy and endurance in the face of strenuous activities with little or no sleep for days and weeks at a time is a real medical mystery. The asterisk says, the question of whether Baba sleeps at all is pertinent. Baba himself gives the impression that on occasions he does sleep briefly. However, whether what he terms sleep for himself is identical with what constitutes sleep for the average person is very doubtful. Baba has never clarified the matter. Often he goes on long travels in India or around the world during which his schedules would be killing for even a young man. Yet he takes them in his stride and sits at attention graciously, receiving long lines of people without visible signs of fatigue. Or if he does look fatigued at some point, a brief period of relaxation is ample to restore him. The immediate Mandali who accompany him are equally incomprehensible in their endurance. Often they too do not have an opportunity to sleep for days on end, meanwhile undergoing the most severe physical and mental strain. When asked how they hold up under it, they merely shrug their shoulders and say Baba helps us. Then the matter is dismissed as of no importance. It is clear that Baba emanates certain invigorating, calming, sanitizing characteristics. The effect is comparable in part to leaving an exasperating job in a dirty, noisy city and going into a range of sublime mountains where one eats, sleeps, and walks in the midst of restorative nature. But whereas nature is passive, Baba is active. And so at this point, the analogy breaks down. The last diffuse atmosphere to be described is the sense of peace which steals over one in Baba's presence. A spirit of agitation is not only very much with us in the confusion of a complex civilization, but it is also very dear to us. The tempo of living picks up just to a certain degree when instead of going into rebellion against it, the individual comes incomprehensibly to enjoy it and uses every means at his command to perpetuate or even intensify it. This is an incredible example of the self perpetuating force of habit. A person may be crying to high heaven that he is so busy that he is about to lose his mind, and yet, when the very next point of decision arises, he will deliberately choose the course of this is one of the most insidious problems of our times. It is a virtually insuperable temptation to seem simultaneously put upon, virtuous, terribly busy, and deserving of commiseration. If recognition of one's martyrdom is not given spontaneously, it is almost impossible not to parade it before whoever will listen.
Jay, would you mind repeating from the previous paragraph because you had wind noise, I think,
Oh yeah, you're right.
or like from the last diffuse atmosphere. That would be good.
Okay. The last diffuse atmosphere to be described is the sense of peace which steals over one in Baba's presence. A spirit of agitation is not only very much with us in the confusion of a complex civilization, but it is also very dear to us. The tempo of living picks up just to a certain degree when instead of going into rebellion against it, the individual comes incomprehensibly to enjoy it and uses every means at his command to perpetuate or even intensify it. This is an incredible example of self perpetuating force of habit. A person may be crying to high heaven that he is so busy that he is about to lose his mind, and yet when the very next point of decision arises, he will deliberately choose the course involving further complexities. This is one of the most insidious problems of our times, for it is a virtually insuperable temptation to seem spontaneously put upon, virtuous, terribly busy, and deserving of commiseration. If recognition of one's martyrdom is not given spontaneously, it is almost impossible not to parade it before whoever will listen. Let's see, where are we? Oh, yeah. Baba again slices through the confusion with two constant injunctions: be happy, don't worry. It must be honestly said that this last is peculiarly difficult to accomplish when one is first around Baba. Events move with such speed, and there are so many precise things to be carried out that one is in a constant sweat of fussing. Also, it is almost impossible not to worry whether someone else will do his job right for Baba, because Baba is a precise taskmaster. His recognition of perfection and accomplishment is matched only by his capacity to forgive the one who was unable to achieve it. Meanwhile, even when one is rushing about at the greatest speed with the most to accomplish, Baba is saying all the time, don't worry, be happy. If it were anyone but Baba, one would cheerfully pick up the nearest club and whack him with it. Strangely enough, as one rushes about, this constantly reiterated injunction begins to filter through. The tangle begins to sort into two piles. On the one hand is busyness and the host of things to be done correctly. On the other hand is calmness, peace of mind, and enjoyment of the job. The two are not at war with one another. In fact, the one makes the other possible. Like most of life, balance appears to be hooked into the appreciation of logical opposites. It seems necessary to enjoy being racingly busy and at the same time to be completely calm in one's own heart. However, as soon as the focal point of being moves from the calmness in the heart over into the racing to get the next thing done, then all hell breaks loose. Baba is not training the individual to endure the unendurable, but to understand that life at its most demanding can still be lived with peace in one's soul. It takes a great teacher to show the fine line between the two, but once the demarcation has been seen, it can never be forgotten. This has been only a quick and superficial discussion of some of the most important atmospheres which Baba generates. But I too am anxious to stop this flow of words and look at what Baba himself says he is here to do. I will not use up time apologizing for the inadequacy of my own viewpoint in trying to assess a great man. It has been offered candidly as being the thoughts, conflicts, and conclusions of a man in the street who has been deeply impressed by the values he has seen. Out of it has come an experience which is best described in words of Stuart Edward White in discussing his early reactions to much evidence of the existence of the invisibles who lived on the other side. White used to say that it is possible for him to explain away each individual occurrence in completely naturalistic terms. However, the total weight of complex explanations finally became so great that he was finally forced to accept the simplifying belief in the existence of the invisibles. My own experience concerning Meher Baba and his flat statement that he is the avatar of the age has followed the same almost grudging assent. One day, the weight of accumulating evidence becomes too great, and my own sense of honesty finally makes the decision for me. The note asterisk says, it has been 10 years now since I described this frame of my own judgment of Meher Baba's avatarhood. Each one of these 10 years has reinforced this conclusion through personal contact, through observation of the results of his ministry, through following the gradual unfolding of originally enigmatic statements, and most of all, through the language of the heart. It has now become established as an instinct, no longer open to conjecture. At best, conviction by weight of evidence is not a satisfactory substitute for direct knowledge. But as I said earlier, I am sure that I shall not have this further degree of understanding of Meher Baba's function until God grants me one day to understand that perfection within my own. Meanwhile, I feel, as the Australian poet Francis Brabazon, who was with me in India through the eventful Sahavas weeks. How does one judge whether Baba is the avatar? He repeated my query late one night. I don't think you judge it. You just wake up one day with the feeling that he is. Eugene, you want to take over? Or should I continue?
Yes, please do continue if you have time.
Okay. Chapter 3, Baba discusses avatarhood. In the long run, the man himself must say what he is. If he is Persian, he says so. If he is Catholic, he says so. If he is allergic to onions, he says so. At least he says so when it is important that the characteristic shall be known. If it is important that that characteristic be unknown, then he will deliberately suppress the fact. Christ was not backward in pointing out his divine function. Muhammad and Buddha, on the other hand, are reported to have insisted that they were ordinary mortals. I am not qualified to argue between the two precedents from which we have to choose. I would prefer to let Baba have it his own way and not condemn or condone him on the score that this great one did or that great one did. The troublesome thing is that there's always a rather liberal crop of persons who proclaim with no embarrassment that they are divinely appointed to the office of Messiah. Who is right, or are they all perhaps fakes? Some clue to the conclusion can be gotten sometimes by seeing a meeting between two individuals who both feel their status to be the highest. I accidentally participated in such an occasion in New York. A splendid looking man in his prime asked to see Mayor Baba privately in his quarters. As he stood in the hall, his message was taken to Baba by one of the Mandali. Mandali came back to the door and said that Baba would be happy to see him, whereupon the man became perturbed and insisted that Baba himself should come to the door and invite him in. This, he stated, was no more than just in greeting someone who was one with God. Hearing the fuss at the door, Baba stepped into the line of sight to the doorway and smilingly beckoned the man to enter. Then, this he then did. The temptation to assert one's divine role is almost infinite. Further, there's much evidence to indicate that it is easy for even a highly developed spiritual teacher to conclude that he has the birthright of Christhood. Even if the great teacher himself should not have these illusions, his followers often elect him to that position after his death. The jungle is too rank for one to make a way easily through it. There appear to be only three legitimate means of concluding the matter of Christhood. The first is the way of one's own heart through trust in the Master himself. Even if one should be wrong in one's estimate, the strength of that faith in the teacher will accomplish things that will dwarf any error in one's judgment. The second way is that of direct experience. That per se means perfection, or at least enlightenment for oneself, and few of us may hope in this lifetime for such absolute knowledge by being. The third is to assess the impact of such a man on the course of civilization. This cannot be used directly at present because we still live in the man's own time. At best, we can try to measure his effect on people who have been close to him. This has been essayed in previous chapters. The best source material for further study is the man's statements about himself. These are very enlightening, for there is a splendid sense of balance in them which carries conviction in itself. This is what Meher Baba has to say on the subject of his own divine function. Quote, age after age, when the wick of righteousness burns low, the avatar comes yet once again to rekindle the torch of love and truth. Age after age, through the noise and disruption of war, fear, and chaos, the avatar's call rings out, come all unto me. Although the veil of illusion may cause this call of the Ancient One to seem as a voice in the wilderness, still its echo and re-echoes pervade through time and space, rousing at first a few and then millions from their deep slumber of ignorance. In the midst of illusion, as the voice behind all voices, it awakens humanity to bear witness to the manifestation of God amidst mankind. The time has come, I repeat the call and bid all come unto me. This time-honored call of mine thrills the hearts of those who have patiently endured, all in their love for God, loving God only for love of God. There are others who fear and shudder at its reverberations and would flee or resist. And there are yet others who are baffled, failing to understand why the all sufficient highest of the high need give this call to humanity. Regardless of the doubts or convictions people may have, I continue to come as the avatar because of the infinite love I bear for one and all. Though judged time and again by humanity in its ignorance, I come to help man distinguish the real from the false. The divine call is little heeded at first because it is invariably muffled in the cloak of the infinite true humility of the Ancient One. Yet, in its infinite strength, it grows in volume until it reverberates and continues to reverberate in countless hearts as the voice of reality. Strength gives rise to humility, while modesty indicates weakness. Only he who is truly great can be really humble. When a man admits his true greatness in the firm knowledge of his greatness, that is in itself an expression of humility. He accepts his greatness as completely natural and merely expresses what he is, just as a man who would not hesitate to admit that he is a man. If a truly great man who knows himself to be truly great were to deny his greatness, this would belittle what he indubitably is. For modesty is the basis of guise, while true greatness is free from camouflage. On the other hand, when a man expresses a greatness he knows he does not possess, he is the greatest of hypocrites. The man is honest, who, knowing that he is not great, firmly and frankly states that he is not great. There are more than a few who are not great, yet assume an air of humility despite their belief in their own considerable worth. Through both words and actions, they repeatedly express their humbleness, professing to be the servants of humanity. True humility is not acquired by donning a garb of humility. True humility emanates spontaneously and continually from the strength of the truly great. Voicing one's humbleness does not make one humble. Regardless of how often a parrot may say, I am a man, it does not make him a man. The absence of greatness is better than the establishment of false greatness by assumed humility. These efforts at humility not only do not express strength, but on the contrary, they are expressions of modesty born of a weakness which springs from a lack of knowledge of reality. Beware of modesty. Under the cloak of humility, it invariably leads one into the clutches of self-deception. Modesty breeds egoism, and man eventually succumbs to pride through assumed humility. The greatest greatness and the greatest humility go hand in hand, naturally and without effort. When the greatest of all says, I am the greatest, it is only a spontaneous expression of an fallible truth. The strength of his greatness does not lie in the raising of the dead, but in his great humiliation when he allows himself to be ridiculed, persecuted, and crucified by those who are weak in flesh and spirit. Throughout the ages, humanity has failed to gauge the true depth of humility underlying the greatness of the Avatar. They judge his divinity by their own limited standards acquired from the religious. Even real saints and sages who have some knowledge of truth have failed to understand the Avatar's greatness when faced with his real humility. History repeats itself through the ages as men and women in their ignorance, limitation, and pride sit in judgment on the incarnated man who declares his godhood, condemning him for uttering the truths they cannot understand. But he is indifferent to abuse and persecution, for in his true compassion he understands. In his continual experiencing of reality he knows, and in his infinite mercy he forgives. God is all, God knows all, and God does all. When the Avatar proclaims that he is the Ancient One, it is God who proclaims his manifestation on earth. When man speaks for or against the Avatar, it is God who speaks through him. It is God alone who declares himself through the Avatar and through mankind. I tell you all with my divine authority that you and I are not we but one. You unconsciously feel my avatar within you. I consciously feel in you what each of you feels. Thus, every one of us is the avatar in the sense that everyone and everything is everyone and everything, all at the same time and for all time. There's nothing but God. He is the only reality, and we are all one in the indivisible oneness of this absolute reality. When one man who has realized God says, I am God, you are God, and we are all one, and when he also awakens this feeling of oneness in his illusion-bound selves, mankind, then questions of lowly and great, poor and rich, humble and modest, good and bad, simply vanish. It is man's false awareness of duality that misleads him into making illusory distinctions and filling the results into separate categories. I repeat and emphasize that in my eternal experiencing of reality, no difference exists between the rich and the poor. If, however, such question of difference between affluence and poverty were ever to exist for me, I would consider the one really poor who possessed worldly riches, but not, sorry, I would consider the one really poor who possessed worldly riches, but not the wealth of love for God. I would know that he was truly rich, who owned nothing but possessed the priceless treasure of love for God. His is the poverty that kings may envy, and that makes even the King of Kings his slave. In the eyes of God, the only difference between the rich and the poor is the intensity and sincerity of their longing for God. Only love for God can annihilate the falsity of the limited ego, which is the basis of life ephemeral. Only love for God can bring one to the realization of the reality of one's unlimited ego, which is the basis of eternal existence. The divine ego expresses itself continually. But man, shrouded in the veil of ignorance, misconstrues this indivisible ego, experiencing and expressing it as the limited, separate ego. Listen when I say with divine authority that the oneness of reality is so totally unlimited and all-pervading that not only are we all one, but even the collective term we has no place in the infinite indivisible oneness. Awaken from your ignorance and try at least to understand that in this completely indivisible oneness, not only is the avatar God, but also the ant and the sparrow, and one and all of you are nothing but God. The only apparent difference is in their states of consciousness. The avatar knows that the sparrow is not a sparrow, while the sparrow does not realize this. Being ignorant of its ignorance, it identifies itself as a sparrow. Do not live in ignorance. Do not waste your precious lifetime differentiating and judging your fellow men, but learn to long for the love of God. Even in the midst of your worldly activities, live only to find and realize your true identity with your beloved God. Eugene, you might have to take over. I think Ryan's about to wake up here.
Thank you very much, Jay. It was awesome. Let's stop here then at the top of page 226.
Great.